And my name is Chung-Ching Tai, and I'm from the Department of Decision Analytics and Risk, also DAR. And I'm very happy to be here and sharing with you. And today's topic is about uncertainty, risk, and decision making. Since I'm from DAR, I want to give you a tested lecture about the components of our department and our programs. And the goal of this lecture is to give you a sense of how it feels like if you can join us in September. I'm gonna give you some examples about decision on the risk and uncertainty, and I hope you can enjoy it. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, sorry. All right, so there was a movie called Forrest Gump. You may not have seen before, but there was a very famous movie line, and it goes like this. Life is like a box of chocolates, and you'll never know what you're gonna get. So this is a very beautiful movie line, and it makes you feel like life is full of surprises, and you feel optimistic about it, and it is so energetic, and you feel so positive and optimistic about your future life. But if you look at your parents, I mean, if you look deep into your mom and dad's eyes, especially their furrowed eyebrows, and you'll soon realize that life is not as easy as you can expect it. And life is not easy because it's full of decision under constraints, under risk, and under uncertainty. And they are difficult to solve. There are big issues, there are big problems. For example, whether your parents should send you abroad to study after you graduate from Southampton, where you stay in the UK and find a job here, or should you go back home? This kind of big problems are difficult to make are difficult to track and make decisions. There are also some daily life problems, and they are nothing easier for you. And these problems are difficult because there are some risk or uncertainty associated with them. And so to tackle this problem, you first need to face the risk and uncertainty. So first thing first, what is the difference between risk and uncertainty? By definition, a risky problem is a decision-making problem with probabilities. For example, after you come to Southampton, you may want to take a specific course of modules, and it would be helpful if you can know the chances of passing these modules before you can make the decision. All right, and we've got some historical data, and we can compute the probability of passing the final exam, and we can provide those figures to you and to help you make a decision. So this kind of situation, when there's a probability associated with the problem, this is called a risky problem and risky decision making. In other case, nobody knows the probabilities. For example, whether COVID-19 will cease to exist next year is an uncertain event because no one knows. Even the experts cannot give you the probabilities. And making decision under uncertainty is extremely difficult because of the lack of information. But still, you need to make decision under uncertainty. So that's the problem. So making risky decision is easier, and making decision under uncertainty is more difficult. So we can start with an example, a data example which is familiar to you. So this is a weather forecast for Southampton from BBC. And as you can see, there are some raining probabilities reported on this page. Sometimes the probabilities are low, sometimes the probabilities are high. And you have to rely on the probabilities to make the decision about whether you should bring the umbrella with you if you're going out tomorrow. So it is a familiar question to you. So you may think that it is very easy, but what if I tells you that you may have misunderstood the probability, the meaning of the probability? So if you misunderstand the definition of the probability, you may reach a wrong decision because of this misunderstanding. So for example, if I ask you, if there's a 30% chance of rain tomorrow, what does it mean by that? It could mean anything. And we've prepared 3 options for you to consider. Option 1, it could be about the region. So 30% could mean that it will rain tomorrow in 30% of the Southampton area. Okay, that's your first choice. Or option 2, it could be about the time. 30% could mean that it will rain tomorrow for 30% of the 24-hour period. So second choice. Or option 3, it could be about the days. 30% could mean that it will rain on 30% of the days like tomorrow. So what's your choice? And we can pause here for 5 seconds and you can think about your choice. Okay, one of them is correct. All right, I can't see your responses, but you can think about that. I'm not going to reveal the correct answer. So the correct answer is option 3. By definition, the raining probability is that if there are 100 days of which the weather conditions are exactly the same as tomorrow, in how many of them you can observe the actual rain? So that's our definition. So what do people think about this definition? There was a survey conducted by psychologists in 2002 across 5 cities in 5 countries. These 5 cities are New York, Amsterdam, Berlin, Milan, and Athens. And there were 750 participants across the world. And the same question has been asked, and the participant had to rank among these 3 options. So they have to put the options which they thought were the most correct one and rank them according to their knowledge or their judgment. And here's the result. Okay, if you look at the left, sorry. If you look at the left top corner of the figure, it says it represents the first choice of those participants. And New York is the exception. For other 4 cities like Amsterdam, Berlin, Milan, and Athens, the inhabitants in these 4 cities think that the correct answer should be time. So they thought that 30% means it will rain for 30% of the 24-hour period. But that's not the correct answer. New Yorkers are good because they have picked the correct answer. On the other hand, what's the least possible answer chosen by those participants? For people from Amsterdam, Berlin, Milan, and Athens, they think that the day's definition, which is the correct answer, it is the least possible one. But it turns out that the least possible one from their choices is the correct one. So it means that people has misunderstood the definition of the weather forecast. So how could it be possible that they can make a right decision based on a wrong interpretation of the weather forecast? And we also observed some interesting interpretations from those participants. For example, the first one, someone said that 30% means if you can look up to the sky and see 100 clouds, then 30% of them are black. So which is a very interesting interpretation. The other one said, that's not about the time. It indicates the amount of rain that will fall. So someone near me, someone in my family thinks that if the percentage is low, it means that it will only rain a little. If the percentage is high, it means that it will rain very hard tomorrow. And someone says that it's not about the time, it's not about the area. The definition is that if we had 100 lives and it will rain in 30 of these lives tomorrow, so it's just like another old movie, Guanghao Day, if you can repeat the same day again and again and again. So these are the interpretation that people have in their minds about a very common question. Then people see weather forecast every day, but they never ask about the true definition of this probabilities. So the first take-home message I want you to know is that although we are educated, even if we have learned statistics before, but we are lazy. People are lazy to ask about the true meaning of this probability. So if you want to make a right decision, which is a risky decision, and some people provide some probability to you, the first thing you need to do is to ask, don't be lazy, to ask the true definition of these probabilities. So that's the first step to make a better decision. Okay, so I'm going to give you a second example. Since we're talking about a program of risk and finance, this is a financial example. And this example involves emotions and decision. And because we as human beings, we always have emotions, negative or positive. And one of my PhD examiners is a psychologist, and she ever told me that more than 90% of our choices are made under certain type of emotions. So that's quite surprising because we always think that we are rational. So some neuroscientists in the United States have conducted a very interesting experiment like this. So they asked participants to play a game, a very simple investment game. And this is a risky problem because they have provided the probability of the two scenarios to the participants. So the participant can actually calculate. They can use the knowledge they have learned from the school to calculate some numbers to help them to make the right decisions. So the rules of the game like this is like this. At the beginning, they will give the participant $20 for them to play 20 repetitive rounds. In each round, the participant had two choices. They can either choose to invest $1 in each round, or they can choose not to invest. If they choose not to invest, nothing happened, and they could keep the dollars in their pocket, right? So that's their own pocket money. If they chose to invest, then there's a 50-50 chance to win $2.50 or to lose $1. So that's a problem. There are 20 repetitive rounds like this, and you have to make 20 decisions in a sequence. All right, so that's pause for a few seconds. If it were you, if you are asked to participate in this game, will you play at all? All right. You can reflect a little bit, but if you have learned mathematics or statistics before, you can make some calculations. So for example, you can compute, sorry, we need to bring out the contents. You can compute the expected value for each round, which is positive and equals to 125. And the expected value is positive. So it means that it's beneficial for you to play this game. Or we can think the problem from a different perspective. If one invests in each of these 20 rounds, so what is the probability of winning some money? It turns out that there's only a 30% chance of losing money. On the other hand, it means that there's nearly a 90% chance of winning extra money from playing this game. So if you're rational, you can make some calculation. You should always play the game. Not always. I mean, for most of the case, for most of the time, you should play the game and you will win some money. So how do people do? These neuroscientists, they ask 3 types of participants to play this game. So the first type of participants are normal people, just like you and me, and they have emotions because they are normal people, and they could have some feelings about the results when they're playing the game, so they're normal. And the second type of participants, they are very special. They are patients, and they have some disease or they have undergone some accidents, so part of their brains have been damaged. So after some surgery, part of their brains has been removed. And those parts of the brain includes amygdala of the frontal cortex or insula. And these areas are in charge of the emotional function. So by removing this part of their brain, they don't have emotion as normal people do. So you can think of this part of the participants as people who don't have emotions, all right? So they are the second type of participants. And the third type of participants are also patients. They have also gone through some kind of brain surgery, and part of their brains has been removed as well. But those brain areas are not related to emotion functions. So although they are patients, they have normal emotions like normal people do. So among these three types of participants, two of them, normal participants and control patients, two of them have emotional reactions like you and me do. And the target participants, the target patients, they don't have emotions at all. So the neuroscientists asked these three groups of people to play this game. So what are the results? As you can see from the number, I just want to let you know that whenever you play this game in each round, you could win some money or you could lose some money. So here, the number here presents the probability that the normal participants, the portion of normal participants to invest in next round if they have won some money in the previous round. So 60% of the participants will invest if they won money from the previous round. Similarly, for control patients who also have emotions, 75% of them will invest if they have won money in the previous round. On the contrary, if they lost money in the previous round, only 40% of them will invest in the next round. And only 37% of normal patients will invest in the next round. The reason is that after they lost money in the previous round, they feel afraid. They don't like to losing money, so they are negative emotions. So they will reduce their participation rate right after they lost money. For those people, the target patients who had no emotions at all, and you can see that no matter they won money or lost money in the previous round, they always have the same participation rate, and they are very close to each other. So these people, they are very consistent. They're very consistent no matter what happens in the previous round. So next, we are going to show you very briefly about the behavior of time. So if we divided these 20 repetitive rounds into 4 sessions, and you can see their evolution of their behavior over time. For those participants, the target patients, they don't have any emotions. Their behavior was very consistent over time. Okay, so their participation rate is very high, nearly 90%. For those people, for people like you and me, or the patients with normal emotions, their participation rate will decrease over time, because they lost money once and for a while, and so they become afraid. They have negative emotions once they lost money, so they will reduce their participation over time. So we end up with different results. For those people, the target patient who don't have emotions, they end up with extra money, which is significantly higher than the result for those two groups who had emotions. And for people who had emotions, their money at the end of the experiment are just slightly higher than what they have got at the beginning. So it means that emotion will cost you some money. Okay, and you may think that what does it tell us about? What it tells us, because it's just a simple example, and just a few people participated in this experiment, and it didn't explain anything. So I'm going to show you some evidence, and this evidence is about the stock market participation rate in the United States. As far as you can remember, after the financial crisis, the stock market has dropped just drastically during several months. And after that, because the governments have some better policies, and the governments around the world started to print money, and so there's a booming stock market all over the world for almost 10 years. So during this booming stock market period, you can see that only the richest 10% increase their stock market participation rate. Half of the US population actually decrease their stock market participation rate, even if they have seen years and years of increasing stock market, booming stock market. But because they lost money in the financial crisis, so they try to avoid investing in the same markets again. So because they have negative emotions in their mind. So these figures is telling the same story. Over the past few decades, the richest 1% and 10% actually increase their stock market participation. But for the majority of the US society, they decrease their stock market participation rate. So what's the result? The result is that the wealth distribution, wealth inequality in the United States have actually deteriorated after the financial crisis. As you can see that the richest 1%, the proportion of their wealth has increased a lot after the financial crisis, and 90% for the majority of the US population, their wealth proportion has decreased after the financial crisis. So back to our second take-home message. Okay, our second take-home message is that we as human beings, we are emotional creatures. Although we think that we are rational, but we always make decisions under some kind of emotions, just like this cartoon says. Homer Thompson once went to a gun shop to buy a gun, and the owner of the shop says that you need to fill out these forms, and after we confirm your identity, you can get your gun. But Homer said, I can't wait because I'm angry now. So we always make decisions under certain type of emotions. So to improve your decision, you should always think twice and wait for a moment. You should remind yourself, am I making my decision under some kind of emotions? If it's not, it's very hard to be aware of your current emotions, but it's always good before you submit your decision, you should think twice and stop for a while, maybe just cool down for a bit and rethink about your decisions again tomorrow. All right. So I've given you 2 examples of risky decisions. So what about uncertainty? If you're lucky enough, some people give you some probability about the circumstances, and it will be easier for you to make decision. But in other cases, nobody can tell you the probabilities. So for example, just like this animation said, the patient was so anxious. He asked the doctor, I'm so afraid, and this is my first operation. And the doctor, who is Mr. Bing, replied, don't worry, this is my first operation as well. So if you ask an expert or ask a professional, what's your judgment of the probability of a specific event which never happened before? And you ask them to give you a probability. And in that case, because there's no historical data for them to compute the actual probability, they will give you a certain type of number, which is called subjective probabilities. So under uncertainty, no one can give you the answer about what's the likelihood that something will happen in the future. But still, we need to make decisions. So in that case, we need to form subjective probabilities in our minds so as to help us to make decisions. But it turns out that we are very poor at this. Okay, there are some well-known problems discovered by scientists, especially psychologists. For example, here I listed 3 common mistakes the 3 common methods that people rely on to make their decision under uncertainty. So we all need to make some judgment about the probability, but our brain is lazy. it's not working as you expect it to be. So our brain relies on some shortcuts, some easy methods to provide some probability for you to make decision. And these three methods was proposed by the 2002 Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman and his colleagues Tversky. And these three methods, due to the time limit, I'm not going to tell you, I'm not going to discuss the details of these three methods, but I can give you a feeling. These three methods says that people rely on their stereotype. People rely on whether it's easy to imagine something, some picture in their minds. They even rely on some numbers which are not related to the events at all to make their judgment. So this rubbish method, it sounds rubbish, but people actually rely on them a lot, even experts and professionals. They rely on this method to make subjective probability forecasts. And because you use this kind of rubbish methods, there are some mistakes or biases which can take place because of this method. For example, gambler's fallacy. You may hear people say that I've lost so many times, so it's my time to turn this around. So it's typically a gambler's thinking, and that's due to the representativeness heuristic. And some people will suffer from illusory correlations. So they are stubborn and they stick to their judgment, and which is obviously wrong. And if you say something against them, they will become very angry about it, and they don't want to change their judgment, and even if there are evidence against their judgment. So these called illusory correlations, and we won't be able to give you some examples, but there are some very interesting examples about this. Or people may be too overconfident. They may be overconfident about their judgment. For example, if you ask an expert, what's the probability that COVID-19 will cease in 2021, and every expert can give you a probability, okay, according to their own judgment. Sometimes just an intuition, but sometimes they are overconfident. So don't. Okay, you just need to remind yourself, even the experts are suffer from this problem. So the third take-home message I want you to know is that we need to admit our weakness, because although we human beings, we used to think that we are rational creatures, but in fact, we are something like this. Okay, we are not as rational as we think ourselves to be. So admit our weakness and try to avoid those mistakes discovered and proposed by scientists. So if you're interested in all this kind of behavior, then welcome to Southampton. We have a lot of modules, and we can deliver some techniques, and we can teach you how to make better decisions given the scientific discovery which has been proposed by scientists during the past decades. And we have a variety of experts in economics, in mathematics, in psychology, even neuroscientists or engineering, and we can share our experiences with you. So that's all for my talk, and I thank you for your listening.